Hello, this is Mrs. Reed, and today we are going to be talking about adding and subtracting polynomials. So I know that these problems look very difficult, but we have actually done this before in Math 7 and in Math 8, and it's all about just combining like terms. And remember, you can only combine like terms if you have same variable to the same power, okay? Now, adding and subtracting polynomials, when you're adding, this is actually pretty easy because you're just going to look at your terms in both of your polynomials and just start adding your like terms together. When we talk about subtracting, though, there's an extra step that you'll have to do before you start adding or subtracting your polynomials, okay? So the first thing that I see, remember, is we always want to make sure that this is in standard form. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. One way is to just start with the first term over here, like a negative 3x cubed, and look for another x cubed over here to combine it with, and then just go down the line to make sure that you hit everything. Or to get it into standard form to begin with, start with the term with the highest variable or with the highest exponent first, see what you can combine it with over here, and then you can go from there, okay? So let's just say I start with this negative 3x cubed. Again, like terms, you can only combine them if they have the same variable to the same power. So looking over here, I have another x to the same power, so I can combine negative 3 plus a positive 7, which is going to give me a positive 4, and then your variable to the same power is going to stay the same. So that means that those are done. Moving on to x squared, I can compare it with or add it with this 12x squared because they have the same variable to the same power. So 11 plus 12 is going to give me a 23x squared. Moving on, remember guys, when you see a subtraction before a number, that is really just a negative. So I have a negative 8x and I have a positive 8x over here. So they're same variable to the same power, because remember, you can put imaginary ones here. So if I were to add those, negative 8 plus a positive 8 is 0, so that means I'm going to have no x's left, so those are just going to cancel each other out. Moving on, I have an x to the 5th. Now notice how I don't have any more x to the 5th powers over here, so that just means that that's going to stay in our answer. I have a constant of 2, and it looks like my other constant that I can combine it with without a variable attached to it is this negative 3. So if I were to combine 2 plus a negative 3, that gives me negative 1. And then my last term that does not have anything to add it with is just this negative 2x to the 4th, so I'm just going to combine that down here at the bottom with my polynomial. And then notice how that took care of all of my terms. Now, my last step is to put this in standard form. So again, standard form, you're going in alphabetical order, and you have to start with your variable to the highest power. So in that case, that's going to be my x to the 5th power. So that term will go first. Then I have a minus 2x to the 4th, because again, we're doing these in descending order. Then I have a 4x cubed. Then I have a 23x squared. And then just a minus 1. So that is my answer. Okay, so let's try another one. So again, I see that we are adding polynomials, so you can only combine terms that have the same variable to the same power. So the first one I see here is x to the 6th power, and looking at my polynomials, there's no other x to the 6th, so I'm just going to leave it as 2x to the 6th. My next one is a negative x to the 5th. So remember, I can put an imaginary 1 here, so that's a negative 1x to the 5th. And the only other term that I can combine it with is this 7x to the 5th. So a negative 1 plus a 7 is a 6. So that will become 6x to the 5th power. And as you guys notice, I like to cross out my terms as I go just to make sure that I got all of them whenever I was adding. So then our next one is a 3x to the third, and I can combine that with my 9x to the third over here. So 9 plus 3 is going to give me 12. So it would be 12x to the third. My next term is I have a negative 14x squared, so my other x squared over here that I can combine it with is this 13. So a negative 14x squared plus a positive 13x squared is a negative 1x squared, or just a negative x squared. And then I have a positive 13 and a positive 2 that I can combine together, so my constants, and that would give me a positive 15. And then again, just looking, the only other term that I couldn't combine anything else with was this negative x to the fourth, so you're just going to attach that at the end, okay? And now you just want to go back and make sure that it's in standard form. So looking, everything was in standard form besides when I got this x to the fourth. So all that I'm going to have to do to get it in descending order is I'm just going to have to move that x to the fourth in between my 6x to the fifth and 12x to the third, and then it would now be in standard form. And that is my answer. Okay, so I'm going to do one more, and then I want you guys to try a couple on your own. So again, you can only combine same variable to the same power together. So in this case, I have an a to the first power. And looking at my other polynomial, I don't have another a to the first power, so that's just going to stay in my answer. I have a 3x squared, and looking, I have no, or sorry, 3a squared. I have no other a squared, so I cannot combine that with anything. I have a 2a cubed, and over here I have a 1a cubed, so I can combine those together because they have same variable to the same power. So 2a cubed plus a 1a cubed would be a 3a cubed. And then my only other term that I have left is this minus a to the fourth. Okay, so now that I have added the polynomials together, I can now just put it in standard form, so descending order. And looking at it, it looks like it's just going to go backwards here. So it's going to go negative a to the fourth plus 3a cubed plus 3a squared plus your a. So again, your variables are going in descending order to make it into standard form. Alright, so how about you guys go ahead and pause the video and then go ahead and try out D, E, and F for me. Okay, so you guys should be done with D, E, and F, so let's see how you guys did. So you guys should have added 8y squared minus a 3y squared to get a 5y squared. And then your last thing you guys should have added were your constants. So you had a positive 2 and a positive 5 to give you a positive 7. And then that was in standard form. So that should have been your answer for D. For E, you had a 4x squared and a negative x squared. So when you combine those, you should have got 3x squared. You could have combined your x's to the first power. So a negative 7x plus a positive 1x would give you a negative 6x. And then your constants, if you were to add them together, 2 plus a negative 2 is 0. So that means that there would be no constants in your answer. And notice how this was in standard form, so that should have been your answer there. And then letter F, so again, I see an x to the fourth, but I see no other x to the fourth to combine it with, so I'm just going to drop it down. I see a negative x squared and a negative 6x squared that I can combine together. So negative 1 plus a negative 6 is a negative 7. I see a 3x and a positive 2x, so that would give me a positive 5x. And then I see two terms that I cannot combine anything else with it, so I'm just going to attach those at the end. And then this one was not in standard form because I see a higher exponent after an exponent of 1. So I'm just going to put this into standard form. So it would be 7x to the fourth. Next one would be my minus x cubed. Then my minus 7x squared plus my 5x minus my 9. And that should have been your answer. So good job if you guys got that, and let's go ahead and move on to the back side, which is subtracting polynomials. So subtracting polynomials, you're still doing the same process by combining like terms together to get it into standard form. The only thing that's different is when you see subtraction, you have to think of this as subtracting like a -1 to everything on the inside of that parentheses. So if you guys think you know what you're doing, hopefully you guys are thinking, oh, we should probably do the distributive property because you are subtracting that -1 to everything on the inside of your second parentheses. So you're pretty much doing the distributive property to all of your terms on the inside. So that would be your first step, is to change the subtraction sign to addition by multiplying this -1 to everything on the inside, okay? Because we can only add polynomials, we cannot subtract them, okay? So your first parenthesis, your first polynomial is going to stay the same. So it's going to stay at 11 x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, minus x plus 5. But then your second parentheses, because now it's going to turn into adding, a negative times a negative would be a positive, so that would be a positive x to the 4th. Negative times a negative would be a positive, so that would be a positive x squared. Negative times a positive 2 would be a -2x, and then a negative times a positive would give you a -8. So pretty much when you're subtracting, you just have to change all of your operations on the inside to its opposite. Because when you're taking a negative times a negative, it turns into a positive, and when you're taking a negative times a positive, it's going to stay a negative, okay? After you do that step, notice how it's the exact same thing that we just did on the front side. So I have an 11x to the 4th, x to the 4th, so that would be 12x to the 4th. I see an x cubed that I can't simplify anything with. Notice how if I want to go ahead and put it into standard form, I'm going to look over here at my x squared, and I don't see anything else that I can simplify that with, so I'm just going to leave it as x squared. I see a minus x and a minus 2x, so that would be a minus 3x. And then a 5 and a -8, that would give me a -3. And that is in standard form, so that would be my answer. Alright, so moving on to B. So again, when you're adding or subtracting polynomials, you first need to look on the inside to see if you are adding or subtracting. If you're adding, you don't have to do anything. You can just start combining like terms. But again, when you are subtracting, you're going to have to change this subtraction sign to addition by multiplying a -1 to every single term on the inside of your parentheses. So your first parentheses will stay the same. So your first polynomial is going to stay the same. Your negative and your negative x cubed, a negative times a negative is a positive, so that will turn into a positive x cubed. A negative times a positive is a negative, so that would turn into a -3x squared. Negative times positive is a negative, so that would turn into a minus 10x. And then a negative times a negative is a positive, so that would turn into a positive 9. So once you do the distributive property, you now can just add like normal. So in standard form, my highest term is a cubed here, x cubed, so a negative x cubed plus a positive x cubed, which means that they would just cancel because that equals 0. I see a negative 5x squared and a negative 3x squared, so negative 5 plus negative 3 is a -8. Looking at my x's, I see a positive 1x and a negative 10x, so that would turn into a negative 9x. And then my constants, I have a -1 and a positive 9, so that would be a positive 8. And that is in standard form, so that is our answer. Alright, I'm going to do one more with you, and then I want you guys to try the others on your own. So I see 12 minus a y cubed plus 4. So again, when you see subtraction with a lot of stuff inside parentheses, you have to take the distributive property by multiplying that -1 times everything on the inside. So your 12 is going to stay the same. but this will turn into a negative y cubed, because a negative times a positive is a negative, and then a negative times a positive is again a negative, so that would turn into a negative 4. So the only thing that I can combine here are my constants, so 12 plus a negative 4, or 12 minus 4, is 8. And then I'm going to have this negative y cubed left, and again, to put it into standard form, I would want to write that down first, and then my plus 8, and that is your answer. Okay, so I want you guys to go ahead and pause the video, and I want you guys to try D, E, and F, and then press play when you're ready for the answers. Alright, so letter D, what you guys should have gotten, so again, you should have done the distributive property first. Your first parentheses, your first binomial should have stayed the same. And then your second parentheses would have turned into a negative u2 minus of 5. And then notice how when you do that, you have no like terms because we had no cubes, we had no squareds, constants are u to the first power, so your answer was just writing that in standard form, which should have been u cubed minus u squared minus u minus a 5. Alright, so same thing with the next one. So I see subtraction, so I'm going to multiply negative 1 times everything inside of my second parentheses. So my first parenthesis here is going to stay the same. My second parenthesis is now a negative 19t cubed, a negative 33t, and a positive 58. Okay, so standard form, my highest exponent that I see is this t to the fourth, and notice how I have no other t to the fourths, so that's just going to stay a 21t to the fourth. My next highest exponent that I see is to the third power, which I see no other third power, so that's going to stay a negative 19t cubed. My next highest exponent was that t squared. Again, I don't see another t squared to combine anything with, so that's going to stay a negative 3t squared. My next one is a negative 33t, which again, nothing else I can combine that with. And then I do see two constants that have no variables attached to them that I can combine together. So a 43 plus a 58 is going to be a 101. Alright, and then our last one. So again, I see subtraction, so I'm going to multiply everything in the second parentheses times negative 1. My first parenthesis is going to stay the same. So a negative times a negative would turn that into a positive 2t to the fourth. A negative times a positive would turn that into a negative 5t to the second. And then a negative times a positive would change that into a negative 1. Okay, then from here, just start combining like terms. So I see a negative t to the fourth plus a positive 2t to the fourth. So those would cancel because that equals 0. I have a 6t squared and a negative 5t squared. So I can combine these together by taking 6 plus a negative 5, which is a positive 1. So in other words, just t squared. And then my constants 5 plus a negative 1, or in other words 5 minus 1, would just give me a positive 4. So your last answer here should have been t squared plus 4. So that is it. So again, the hardest thing about this is just remembering that when you see a negative sign, you're really taking that minus sign and multiplying it times negative 1 on the inside of every single term on the inside of that second parentheses by using the distributive property. And then after that, you're just going back to your adding like terms rule like we did on the front side with adding. So that is it. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Thanks.